You would not believe how fast everything unraveled. One moment, it looked like Mendeecees Harris and Yandy Smith were finally back on stable ground, smiling for the cameras, shutting down rumors like they always do. And then, out of nowhere, a name started circulating. Quiet at first, almost like a whisper nobody wanted to say too loud. But whispers have a way of turning into storms, and this one came with receipts. Fans are shocked, and honestly, you might be too. Because this is not just another rumor. This is something deeper, something messier, something that has people questioning everything they thought they knew about this relationship. Late-night sightings, private calls that were never meant to be heard. And now, a woman who has finally stepped out of the shadows, and she is not hiding anymore. What makes this even more explosive is Yandy's reaction. She is not brushing this off. She is not posting her usual calm, controlled responses. No, emotions ran high, and insiders are saying this time, it hit differently. This time, it felt real. The kind of real that changes everything. And here is where it gets worse. Because the people closest to them are starting to pick sides. Friends turning quiet, family members speaking out in ways nobody expected. The family was left divided, and the tension is spilling into public view faster than anyone can control it. So who is this new woman? How long has this been going on? And why does it seem like this might be the moment Yandy finally says enough is enough? Stay right here, because what you are about to hear next takes this story to a level nobody saw coming. The moment that name slipped into the conversation, everything changed, and you could feel it even through the screen, because people who had been defending this relationship for years suddenly went quiet, and that silence said more than any denial ever could, because this was not just another random rumor floating around the blogs. This felt organized, detailed, and way too specific to ignore. And the first sign that something was seriously off came late one evening when a blurry clip started making its rounds online, showing Mendeecees stepping out of a black SUV, looking relaxed, almost too comfortable, and right behind him, a woman who clearly was not trying to hide, not ducking, not covering her face, just walking like she belonged there, like she had been there before. And that single clip lit a fire that nobody could put out. You had fans zooming in, slowing it down, comparing outfits, matching timelines, trying to figure out who she was and how long this had been going on, and within hours, her identity started to take shape, a name connected to a lifestyle brand, a social media presence that suddenly went from quiet to very, very active, and what shocked people the most was not just that she existed, but how confident she seemed, posting cryptic messages that did not confirm anything directly but hinted just enough to keep people talking, captions about loyalty being rare, about knowing your worth, about not competing where you do not compare, and every post felt like a direct shot even though no names were mentioned. Meanwhile, Yandy was silent, and that silence made everything louder, because people were used to her stepping in quickly, shutting things down, controlling the narrative before it got out of hand, but this time, hours turned into a full day, then another, and still nothing, no post, no statement, no quick live session to clear things up, and fans started to panic, wondering if the reason she was not speaking was because she could not deny it this time, and behind the scenes, insiders were already whispering that things had been tense for a while, that arguments had been happening long before this woman ever appeared online, that there were trust issues that never fully healed. Then came the first real crack, a post that Yandy eventually shared, not directly addressing anything, but the tone was different, colder, more distant, a message about protecting your peace, about not ignoring signs anymore, and people read between every single line, because when someone like her speaks indirectly, it usually means the truth is worse than what is being said out loud. And almost immediately, the comments exploded, fans asking questions, demanding answers, picking sides, some defending her, others blaming her for staying too long in something that clearly had problems. And just when it seemed like things could not get more intense, a second video surfaced, clearer this time, taken at what looked like a private gathering, music in the background, laughter, and there he was again, Mendeecees, standing close to the same woman, leaning in, speaking into her ear in a way that did not look casual at all, and the energy between them was undeniable. And that clip did something the first one did not, it convinced people, it made the situation feel real, undeniable, impossible to explain away as coincidence. At that point, emotions ran high across the board, fans were arguing in comment sections, friends of the couple started posting vague messages of their own, some clearly siding with Yandy, others staying neutral but noticeably quiet when asked directly, and the family was left divided, because once something like this becomes public, it is no longer just between two people, it pulls everyone in, and the pressure starts building from every direction. And then came the part nobody expected, a voice recording that leaked late at night, the kind that spreads fast before anyone can stop it, and in that recording, a woman's voice, calm but firm, speaking about promises that had been made, about time spent together that was not supposed to be exposed, about feeling disrespected now that everything was out in the open. And even though no names were said, listeners were quick to connect the dots, and suddenly this was not just about rumors or sightings anymore, this felt like confirmation wrapped in emotion. You could almost picture what was happening behind closed doors, the conversations, the confrontations, the questions that demand answers but rarely get honest ones, because when trust is broken at this level, it is not just about what happened, it is about everything that led up to it, every moment that now feels suspicious, every memory that gets re-examined. And sources close to the situation began hinting that Yandy had already confronted him, that the discussion was intense, voices raised, accusations thrown back and forth, and no clear resolution in sight. What makes it even more complicated is that this is not the first time their relationship has faced public scrutiny, but this time feels different, heavier, like something has shifted in a way that cannot be undone, and people who have followed their story for years are starting to question if this is the moment where everything finally falls apart for good. And just as the situation reached a boiling point, that same woman posted again, this time less subtle, a photo that many believe was taken in a place that looked very familiar, a setting fans recognized from previous posts tied to Mendeecees, and the caption was short but loud, talking about not hiding anymore, about stepping into the light. And that single post sent shockwaves through the entire situation, because now it felt intentional, deliberate, like she was no longer content being a secret, like she was ready for whatever came next, and right at that moment, everything shifted again, because now it was no longer just about what people thought they saw, it was about what was being openly shown. And the question hanging in the air became impossible to ignore: what happens when the truth refuses to stay hidden any longer? What happens next is where everything starts to unravel in a way nobody can control, because that post did not just sit there quietly, it spread across every platform within minutes, and suddenly everyone was watching, waiting to see how Yandy would respond now that things had crossed a line that could not be walked back, and behind the scenes, the tension was building fast. Because sources were saying that she had seen the post almost immediately, and the reaction was not calm, it was not measured, it was explosive. You can imagine the moment, the phone in her hand, the screen lighting up with notifications, messages pouring in from friends, from family, from people asking if she was okay, and then that one post staring back at her, bold, unapologetic, almost daring her to respond, and that is when everything reportedly boiled over, because insiders claim that she reached out directly, not with a quiet message, but with questions that demanded answers, and the kind of tone that leaves no room for excuses. "What is this?" she reportedly asked, her voice tight, controlled but shaking underneath, and on the other side, there was hesitation, the kind that says more than words ever could, because when someone pauses too long, it tells you they are trying to figure out which version of the truth to give, and that silence only made things worse, because Yandy was not in the mood for half answers anymore. Meanwhile, Mendeecees found himself cornered in a way he had not been before, because this was no longer private, this was public, loud, and impossible to ignore, and according to those close to him, he tried to downplay it at first, calling it a misunderstanding, saying the videos were taken out of context, that the posts were being twisted, but those explanations did not land the way he hoped, because the evidence kept stacking up, and the timing made everything look even more suspicious. And just when it seemed like things could not get more intense, the woman at the center of it all went live, unannounced, no warning, just suddenly appearing on screen with thousands of viewers joining within seconds, and the energy was different this time, no more cryptic captions, no more subtle hints, this felt direct, intentional, like she had something to say and she was done holding back. "I am not going to keep quiet while people try to paint me as something I am not," she said, looking straight into the camera, her tone steady but firm, and instantly the comments exploded, people asking questions, demanding clarity, throwing accusations, and she did not shy away from it, she leaned in, addressing things in a way that only added fuel to the fire. She spoke about time spent together, about conversations that went deeper than friendship, about promises that made her believe she was more than just an option, and even though she never said his name directly, it was clear who she was talking about, and that clarity hit hard, because now it was not just speculation, it was a narrative being built in real time, one that painted a picture Yandy could not ignore. Fans are shocked, and the reactions were immediate, people picking sides, debates breaking out across every comment section, some believing her, others calling it a calculated move, but either way, the damage was done, because once something like that is said publicly, it cannot be taken back, it becomes part of the story whether anyone likes it or not. And as that live continued, things took an even sharper turn, because she hinted at having proof, messages, moments, details that could back up everything she was saying, and that single statement shifted the entire situation, because now it was not just about what had already been seen, it was about what could still be revealed, and that kind of uncertainty creates pressure that builds fast. Back on the other side, Yandy was not staying silent anymore, because shortly after that live ended, she finally spoke, and the tone was unlike anything fans had heard from her before. There was no attempt to smooth things over, no effort to present a united front. This was raw, direct, and filled with emotion that had clearly been building for a long time. "I have been patient," she said in her own post. "I have been understanding, but I am not blind," and those words hit hard, because they carried a weight that suggested this was not just about one incident, this was about a pattern, something deeper that had been ignored or forgiven before but could not be brushed aside anymore. The family was left divided almost instantly, because once she spoke, people around them began reacting in their own ways, some showing support openly, others choosing silence that spoke volumes, and the tension between both sides started becoming visible, subtle at first, then more obvious as time went on, with unfollows, indirect posts, and quiet shifts in loyalty that fans noticed right away. And then came the confrontation that insiders say changed everything, a private meeting that was anything but calm, where both sides finally faced each other without cameras, without filters, just raw emotion and unanswered questions filling the space, voices raised, accusations flying, each person trying to defend their version of the truth. "You embarrassed me," Yandy reportedly said, her voice breaking through the tension, and that single sentence captured everything, because it was not just about betrayal, it was about the public nature of it, the way it played out in front of everyone, leaving her to deal with the fallout in real time. On the other side, there were attempts to explain, to justify, to minimize, but none of it seemed to land, because when trust is shaken this deeply, words lose their power, and what is left is a gap that feels impossible to close, and those who were close enough to witness parts of that confrontation say it ended without resolution, without agreement, just distance growing wider between them. And just when it seemed like things might slow down, another twist hit, because that same woman posted again, this time sharing a message that many believe was directed straight at Yandy, talking about not fighting over someone who made their own choices, about knowing when to walk away from situations that were never honest to begin with, and that post reignited everything all over again. Because now it was not just about what had happened, it was about what was still happening, the ongoing tension, the back and forth without direct communication, the public statements that felt like indirect conversations happening in front of millions, and the situation was no longer contained, it was evolving, growing more complicated by the hour. And right at that point, as emotions continued to rise and the lines between truth and perception blurred even further, one question started echoing louder than all the rest, not just whether this relationship could survive, but whether it even should, and that question hung heavy as everything moved into an even more unpredictable phase where the next move could change everything again. That question did not just linger, it started shaping every move that came after, because once people begin asking whether something should continue, it means the foundation is already cracked, and what happened next pushed those cracks even further apart, because behind all the posts, the lives, and the public tension, there were real conversations happening that were far more intense than anything being shown online. Insiders began hinting that Yandy had reached a breaking point, not just emotionally, but mentally, because carrying the weight of public scrutiny while dealing with private betrayal creates a pressure that builds fast, and those close to her say she started pulling back, distancing herself in ways that were subtle at first but quickly became noticeable, fewer shared appearances, no joint moments, no effort to present unity anymore, and that shift did not go unnoticed by fans who had been watching every detail closely. At the same time, Mendeecees was facing his own kind of pressure, because the narrative was slipping out of his control, and every attempt to explain things seemed to make it worse, because now people were not just looking at the current situation, they were revisiting the past, bringing up old issues, old doubts, and connecting them to what was happening now, creating a storyline that felt bigger than one moment, and that made it harder for him to defend himself without it sounding incomplete. And then came a moment that many are calling the turning point, a quiet but powerful shift that happened during what was supposed to be a normal public appearance, where Yandy showed up alone, composed but distant, answering questions with careful words that revealed just enough without saying everything, and when she was asked directly about her relationship, there was a pause, a long one, the kind that makes people lean in, and then she said something that sent shockwaves through everyone watching. "Sometimes you have to choose yourself," she said, her voice steady but carrying an emotion that could not be hidden, and that single sentence felt like confirmation to many, because it suggested a decision had already been made, even if it had not been officially announced, and the reaction was immediate. Fans are shocked, trying to interpret what it meant, debating whether this was the end or just another phase in a relationship that had already survived so much. But what made things even more intense was what happened shortly after, because that same night, the woman at the center of it all posted again, and this time there was no subtlety left, no coded messages, just a clear statement about not being anyone's secret, about stepping into a situation that was handled, a word that instantly caught attention because of what it implied. And that choice of wording sent people into a frenzy, trying to figure out what exactly had been handled and by whom. Emotions ran high once again, because now it felt like two separate narratives were unfolding at the same time, one of closure and self-respect, and another of confidence and claim, and those narratives were clashing in a way that made the entire situation feel even more complicated, because there was no clear timeline, no confirmed truth, just overlapping stories that kept shifting with every new post. Behind the scenes, the family was left divided in a deeper way than before, because at this point, it was no longer about choosing sides quietly, it was about navigating a situation that had become public and unavoidable, with some members reportedly encouraging Yandy to walk away completely, to protect herself and move forward, while others believed there was still something worth saving, creating a tension that extended beyond the couple and into everyone connected to them. And then came the moment that no one saw coming, a private gathering that turned into something much bigger when details started leaking out, because according to those who were present, both sides ended up in the same space unexpectedly, and what was supposed to be a controlled environment quickly turned into a confrontation that nobody could ignore. Voices were raised, emotions spilling over, years of history coming out all at once, and in that moment, everything that had been building finally collided, and those who witnessed it say it was intense, uncomfortable, and impossible to forget, because there were no filters, no cameras to perform for, just raw truth and raw emotion colliding in real time. "I stood by you when nobody else did," Yandy reportedly said, her voice cutting through the tension, and that statement carried the weight of everything she had invested, everything she had defended, and everything she now felt was being disregarded, and on the other side, there were responses, attempts to explain, to shift the perspective, to argue that things were not as simple as they seemed, but those words struggled to hold ground against the emotion behind hers. And right when it seemed like things might settle, that woman spoke up too, not backing down, not avoiding the moment, but stepping into it in a way that surprised everyone there, and what she said only added another layer to the situation, because she spoke about honesty, about not wanting to be hidden, about stepping into something she believed was real, and that perspective clashed directly with everything Yandy was expressing, creating a moment where both sides felt justified in their own way. The room reportedly went quiet after that, because sometimes the loudest part of a confrontation is what comes after the words, the realization that there is no easy resolution, no simple way to fix what has already been broken, and that silence said more than anything else, because it marked a point where things could no longer go back to what they were before. And as details from that night continued to leak out, the public reaction only grew stronger, with people analyzing every piece of information, trying to understand what really happened, who was telling the truth, and what it all meant for the future, and the answers remained unclear, because the situation had become too layered, too emotional, too public to be reduced to one simple explanation. And now, as everything continues to unfold, the tension has not eased, it has only shifted into something more uncertain, because at this stage, it is no longer about one revelation or one confrontation, it is about the aftermath, the decisions that come next, the paths each person chooses moving forward, and whether there is anything left to rebuild or if this is the moment where everything finally comes to an end. And just as that uncertainty begins to settle in, a new development starts to surface that threatens to change the entire story once again. And just when it seemed like the storm might finally calm, a series of leaked messages surfaced online, screenshots that appeared to show private conversations between Mendeecees and the new woman, conversations that were intimate, detailed, and impossible to ignore, and once those messages hit social media, the chaos intensified, because now there was a paper trail, a digital record that painted a story fans had been piecing together for weeks, and the reactions were instant, emotional, and fierce. Fans are shocked, scrolling through every word, dissecting every line, reading between the emojis, the timestamps, the tone, trying to make sense of it all, and insiders say that the leaks were strategic, possibly meant to provoke, to force a reaction from Yandy, or maybe even to assert dominance in a narrative that had been slipping away, and whatever the intention, it worked, because now the pressure was unbearable on all sides. Yandy reportedly saw the leaks almost immediately, and those close to her say that her response was not calm, it was raw, it was a combination of disbelief, anger, and heartbreak, a cocktail of emotions that had been simmering under the surface for months and now erupted in full force, and sources claim that she confronted Mendeecees directly, demanding answers in a way that left no room for excuses or half-truths. How long? She allegedly asked, her voice tight with controlled rage, the kind of control that makes you think twice before speaking, and the silence that followed was deafening, because in moments like these, a pause can speak louder than words, and insiders say that he struggled, caught between denial, justification, and the undeniable truth that was now staring him in the face. Meanwhile, the new woman went public again, this time with photos that appeared to be taken during private moments, locations fans recognized as places associated with Mendeecees, and the captions were deliberate, assertive, almost daring anyone to question her place in the story, and that audacity only added fuel to the fire, because now it was clear she was not just a shadow in the background, she was stepping into the spotlight intentionally. The tension among fans reached fever pitch, with comment sections exploding into debates, theories, and accusations, some defending Yandy, some supporting the new woman, and some simply observing, captivated by the drama unfolding in real time, and every new post, every subtle gesture, every interview snippet became evidence to be analyzed, discussed, and interpreted, creating a frenzy that showed no signs of slowing. Back behind closed doors, sources suggest that the family was forced to take sides, not openly, but in subtle ways that fans picked up on, from cryptic posts to quiet withdrawals from social events, alliances forming in whispers, and the pressure of navigating a situation that had now become a public spectacle was reportedly taking a toll on everyone involved, with relationships fraying and old wounds resurfacing. And then came a live confrontation that insiders are calling the most intense moment yet, a meeting where both Yandy and Mendeecees faced each other, with the new woman present as well, in a room charged with emotion, tension so thick you could almost feel it online through the stories and leaks, voices rising, accusations flying, and the kind of raw, unfiltered drama that fans crave but never expect to see in full clarity. "I gave you everything, and this is what I get," Yandy reportedly said, her voice breaking but firm, echoing the frustration and betrayal she had carried for months, while on the other side, Mendeecees attempted to explain, to justify, but every word seemed to falter under the weight of evidence, of emotion, and of the undeniable reality that the narrative had already shifted against him. The new woman reportedly spoke up as well, asserting her presence, emphasizing that she had done nothing wrong, that she was stepping into something that was already in motion, and that claim sent shockwaves through the room, because now the confrontation was no longer just about betrayal, it was about conflicting truths, competing narratives, and the human emotions tangled up in both. As the hours went on, sources suggest that emotions ran high, tempers flared, and moments of silence punctuated the heated exchanges, a kind of tension that left everyone present exhausted, overwhelmed, and uncertain about what would come next, and once the confrontation ended, the aftermath was immediate, with posts, stories, and insider accounts starting to leak out, feeding the public frenzy and making it clear that nothing would ever be the same. Fans are shocked, not just by the confrontation itself, but by the level of transparency, the intensity, and the emotional stakes involved, because this was no longer a hidden scandal or a whispered rumor. This was an unfolding saga with real consequences, and every fan, every follower, every observer was caught in the whirlwind, trying to keep up with the twists, the revelations, and the emotional roller coaster that showed no sign of stopping. And just when people thought the drama had peaked, another twist hit, because a series of new photos appeared online showing Mendeecees and the new woman in what seemed like intimate settings, moments that suggested the relationship was deeper, more committed, and far from casual, and the timing of these images, surfacing right after the confrontation, made it impossible for anyone to ignore, forcing both fans and insiders to re-evaluate everything they thought they knew. Yandy's response, while restrained, reportedly carried an intensity that spoke volumes, a combination of restraint, dignity, and underlying fury, signaling that while she was maintaining composure publicly, behind the scenes the emotional stakes were higher than ever, and sources close to her hint that decisions were being made, lines were being drawn, and a turning point was rapidly approaching. The social media storm intensified as influencers, friends, and fans dissected every move, every post, every comment, amplifying the tension and keeping the story alive in ways that felt unstoppable, and as new evidence surfaced, each new revelation layered onto the previous ones, making the situation feel increasingly complex, emotionally charged, and impossible to resolve quietly. And through it all, the narrative was shifting rapidly, with public perception swinging from one side to the other, alliances forming and dissolving, and the entire saga becoming more than just a personal drama. It became a story that captured attention, created debate, and left everyone watching, waiting for the next move, the next revelation, the next shock that would change everything again.